TALK.
The world is looking at El Paso.
What will we say to the world? From the KELP studio in El Paso, this is 915 Talk.
And now your host.
Good afternoon, beautiful citizens of the borderland. This is 915 Talk, and I am your host, Andy Frecka, and we are broadcasting from the heart of the world's largest borderplex. We are here at the KELP studios in El Paso, Texas, and we say congratulations to all of our listeners because you are feeding your mind. You are feeding your souls through amplitude modulation at 1590 AM, through frequency modulation at 95.9 FM in El Paso, 89.3 FM in beautiful Las Cruces in southern New Mexico, or through the worldwide information superhighway as we are streaming worldwide at KELPradio.com. And today we have Mac Daddy Del Norte on the board. Mac Daddy, how you doing today?
Yes, I'm doing good, Andy.
Yeah, so Mac Daddy, we're going to get personal with you today.
Okay.
You have two kids?
I do.
How old are they?
2 and 1.
2 and 1. Okay. So before we began talking today, I said, Mac Daddy, you got to hear this. You got to hear our conversation today because it's going to affect you personally.
I heard you say that.
Yeah.
And I asked why. And
Yeah.
you're like, well, you're just going to have to wait to find out.
Yeah. You're going to be learning about why this is going to affect you. So you have a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old.
Yes.
So Mac Daddy, do you want them to go to public school or private school?
Well, I haven't decided yet, but we are inclining to private school.
Okay. So how do you think that's going to be for your family as far as, I mean, there's tuition, there's all those things. Is that something that you're concerned about?
Like I said, not at the moment,
Yeah.
but I know that when I get there, it's probably going to be a concern, and I probably should start worrying ahead of time. I had to start either saving up or trying to look for the funds to be able to give them a good proper education.
Yeah, start today.
Yep.
So today we have a very special guest with us. Do you know why they're special, Mac Daddy Del Norte?
Not at all. I don't.
Well, first of all, they are the unique expression of an endlessly creative God, but also they are the executive director of the Texas Private Schools Association, and they're super important. You know how I know? Every time I email them, they're like, I was just in a legislative session in Austin. I'm like, that's super important.
Yes.
I don't know what that means, but we're going to find out.
Okay.
All right.
All
And we're going to be talking especially about school choice.
Okay.
Do you know what school choice is?
Not at all.
Okay. Yeah. I think that I know, but probably I'm completely wrong. It's so we're going to talk about a lot of the myths involved with school choice, but it's a really big deal because it looks like I think it's going to go through in Texas. It's really going to affect both public schools and, well, especially private schools. So there's a lot to talk about. I've talked with pastors in our El Paso community who, because of school choice, are thinking about starting schools. It's a whole thing, Mac Daddy Del Norte.
Wow. I wasn't aware.
Yeah. So, and I think it's going to affect you in a positive way, and your family, but we'll find out. So without further ado, wherever you are, if you are, maybe you're in Old Mesilla, New Mexico, and that means that the Texas legislative session doesn't really affect you, but it'll also be really interesting to hear about. Or if you're in Fabens or out east somewhere, or maybe you're in central El Paso, wherever you are, let's give a very warm borderland welcome to the one, the only, Laura Colangelo. Laura, welcome to 915 Talk.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, so you've been going to all these legislative sessions. You're advocating for private schools in Texas. And before we get into the school choice conversation, which I believe is a big conversation, I'm excited to jump into. And I know a lot of pastors and schools are really talking about this. Before we get into that, can you give me just a little bit of an idea of what the Texas Private Schools Association is all about?
Absolutely. So I have the great honor and pleasure of representing the 941 private accredited nonprofit schools in the state.
Okay.
So we call ourselves the public voice of private schools in Texas. So it's about a little over 300,000 students that are in our schools. And so I hang out at the Capitol. Right now, we're in legislative session, which only occurs in Texas every other year, in odd numbered years for 140 days. So it's a very intense time when everyone is in the building, and we are talking about issues from water to transportation to education. Obviously, I'm mostly in the education conversations, but you'd be surprised how it could branch out a little bit. But I am there representing private schools. I get to visit schools in the off season and talk to them about what their issues are. And then I read every bill. I think we're up to about 3,000 bills that have been filed. Make sure that the bill either if it explicitly includes private schools, then that needs to be added to my list of things that I'm focused on. Or I need to look through and read the bill and see, well, could it be amended? Is there a way that private schools could be included through this process? Right. And things are moving so fast and furiously that I need to get that on my track so that I get text alerts when something like that happens. So I'm in there having conversations with senators and representatives. Other lobbyists that represent other groups of people are my public school friends who, were interested in topics together. And as you alluded to, the big conversation in Austin right now is private school choice. And it is the governor's priority. He tried to get this done in 2023 and it didn't happen. So he did some work between the sessions on campaigns and got some people out of office who didn't support it before. And so now he's back in full force. So I'm really excited about it. My schools are excited about it. We'll get to the details when you're ready. But that conversation is sort of, it's huge right now. I mean, just walking down the halls, that's what everyone's talking about. One bill is already passed the Senate. The House hearing is next week. So this is very good timing. And so it's moving pretty quickly. So but my job as a whole is to protect the independence and autonomy of private schools. So school choice is a piece of that. I need to represent the private schools in the conversation, but I'm looking out for private schools and, security, school marshals, EpiPens, school nurses. I mean, all different kinds of topics that relate to private schools that I'm working on. It just so happens that school choice is the hot topic right now.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, we're definitely going to talk about the hot topic. But you said 941 private schools. How many of those are religious in nature? Like, what would you say the percentage is?
I would say probably 60 to 70% are religious of some nature. And the reason that is so high is that it's really expensive and it must be a passion project to start a private school. And you mentioned some pastors in your area that are looking to start private schools. It takes a lot of investment, both financially, spiritually, energy to start a private school. So it's generally communities of faith that are able to do that. Plus, they want to be able to teach children through the lens of their faith, whatever that faith is. And I represent all types of faith. I have Jewish schools, I have Islamic schools, I have Christian schools. By far the most are Christian, but we're proud of our diversity in the offerings of all the private schools across the state. So that's the reason there's so many religious schools, but there are also some really fantastic non-sectarian schools as well. The idea is that like-minded people with a passion for education come together and offer an education that parents want and are willing to pay for. And so that's how we've come up with these 941 schools. We will probably end up having more once these ESAs are passed. Like you said, people are
sorry. What's an ESA?
Oh, good question. Sorry, I jumped ahead. So ESA it's the education savings account. That is what the school choice bill is. Yeah,
we're building the curiosity education savings account. Yeah, so Mac Daddy said he's going to start saving, but from what I understand so far, it's the governor that's going to be saving for Mac Daddy Del Norte. I'm sure I got that totally wrong. But
yeah, the governor's working hard on his behalf. I will tell you that.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So let me ask you about this as well, because I actually thought the percentage of religious would be higher. I thought you were going to say like 90 or 95%. I don't know of in El Paso very many private schools, maybe one that I know of that are not religious, at all. But what I'm curious about, and we'll probably have to get into this more later, but as money comes in from the government, in the past, I would assume there's some grants, things like this. How does that affect the school's ability to continue to have religious freedom?
That is an excellent question, and I'll refer to what you mentioned. There has the grants I think you're talking about are title funds. There are federal funds that do flow into private schools, into private school students. It is done in a way that's called equitable services, and that means that services are provided to private school students. There is not money going into a school, and we want to be very careful about that. We want to preserve our independence and autonomy and our ability to teach and to maintain a religious community. So that's one piece that's already happening. When we're talking about school choice and education savings accounts, we're talking about state funds. So this is a different funding mechanism. The way it's going to work is that families will apply to the program, and it's $1 billion appropriation. So maybe 80 to 100,000 children statewide will qualify for this and be funded. So families will apply to the program, and if they meet the prioritization, which we'll get to eventually, then they're accepted into the program, and then they will have a transfer of funds. It'll probably be an app on a phone, and about $10,000 will come through and be in their account on the phone to the family. And then
sorry,
the family,
I apologize. You gave an amount. Did you say
around $10,000 per child per year?
Okay.
And it will be in the parent's account. And then the parent can direct that money into an approved educational provider, including the accredited private schools that choose to participate in the program. So it is not a direct check going from the state of Texas to St. Paul's Catholic School.
Right.
It is money given into a parent's account, and the parent can choose to direct that funding to an approved educational provider.
Does that work? Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, no, and just to answer your previous question, there is specific language that's required for us to support a bill that has to be in any bill that's filed, that is very explicit in protecting the religious nature, the religious freedom of a private school, and the private school autonomy. And it says that they are not a recipient of federal financial assistance, and they are not deemed a state actor by accepting children using ESA funds.
Right.
And so this is the way that private schools can continue to be private and can continue to operate within their faith and have families that have gotten a subsidy from the state in order to attend. They, for some reason, were not getting what they needed in a public school or wherever they were before, homeschool or wherever. But we need to protect the private schools themselves and make sure that they're able to remain private.
Right. Okay. So what if Mac Daddy Del Norte decides not to go to private school, but he decides to homeschool? Can he just take that? Can he pocket that money?
Because, he can, but it's a lower amount.
Okay.
And let me back up and tell you what I'm describing today. We're in the middle of the legislative process and getting this done. So this is not the final say in the program that's going to be enacted and parents will be able to use in probably the school year 2026, 2027. So we're still a few years out from this actually being in operation. But what's happening right now is these bills are moving through the legislature. And so the details may shift a little bit, but I can tell you generally what this is going to look like.
Yeah. So there's a big fat asterisk next to everything we're saying, but hopefully what we're talking about is pretty close to the idea. And all the information on this program is for informational purposes only.
Yes, do not come at me if something changes that I'm telling you right now.
Exactly, 100%. So I like to do something on 915 Talk where I give my idea of how something works, and then the expert tells me how I'm completely wrong. Okay. So this is what I think school choice is. I think if I should definitely go out this year and open up a school, a private school, and I should definitely hire some teachers, set up a business plan, because I'm going to get $10,000 per student next year. Does that sound about right, Laura?
No, I'm sorry. That's a little bit of
Oh,
a dream
no.
world. Yes, certainly, we welcome newcomers to the private school world. However, the schools that are going to be eligible for these ESAs will be accredited private schools, and that is a
Okay.
process to become accredited.
Uh-huh.
And so it will take some time to make sure that you have hired the qualified teachers, that you have the curriculum in place. There are 19 accreditors currently recognized in the state of Texas. So you would
Okay.
need to open up a school under those standards of accreditation and make sure that your facilities meet their requirements, that your curriculum, your hiring practices, your governance structure, everything it takes to create a private school, you'd have to make sure meets the standards of that accreditor. So you can't hang a shingle tomorrow and invite students with $10,000 to come to your school. You have to do some groundwork there. Also, we're talking about a maximum of 100,000 students statewide.
Right.
Right now,
I
there are
caught that.
5.5 million public school students. So not every child in the state of Texas is going to have one of these ESAs.
Right.
It's going to be a program that probably grows over time, but I don't think anyone right now seeing dollar signs in their eyes think opening a private school and getting started right now, that's just not realistic.
Okay, that's very disappointing for me, because
I'm
Mac
sorry.
Daddy and I were going to start a school, but I guess we'll just stick with radio. But I mean, so then my next idea is, in El Paso we have several, in the area we have several school districts. So probably in my scenario, in my mind, instead of those school districts getting the money, my school would get the money. Is that right?
Well, school finance is complicated, but let me try to say this as succinctly as I can. TPSA would not be supporting a private school choice bill if we thought it was going to harm our public school districts. We
Okay.
wouldn't. We have looked at research, and we looked at the 20 years of private school choice programs operating in other states. And we look very closely at that and all of the research coming out of it. And what we like is that in areas that have a robust private school choice program, the per pupil funding in the school district goes up, the test scores in the public schools go up, and families are happy with the options that they have. So we look at this and think, if we're going to hurt public schools, we're out, because we need strong public schools, we need strong private schools, we need all the options on the table. But when you look across the country, that is not how it's borne out. Now, public school districts are fighting this idea very hard. It's a very controversial idea, and there's a lot of fighting going on in the Capitol about this, because they haven't seen in the other states how this works for all the kids. And also, let me back up for a minute and say this appropriation, this $1 billion that we're talking about, is coming from general revenue. Public schools are funded by what's called the Foundation School Program. So this is a separate pot of money that we're talking about that will fund the ESAs. Now, so that's important to recognize. Now, when a child does leave a public school to go to a private school, then yes, there's an average daily attendance amount that goes with that child to wherever they go. They could go to the neighboring public school district, they could homeschool, they could be at a charter school, or they could go to private school. That happens right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same mechanism. But when that child does go to another area to be educated, there is still some funding. That statewide M&O does go away, but there's still some funding that goes to that public school, and the public school is not educating the child. So it's not just sapping public schools from all of their money. Public schools, like I said, what we saw in Florida, the per pupil funding does go up. when these programs are in place. So it's kind of a complicated scenario. And so fundamentally, what I've said from the beginning is like, we look around in other states and say, have y'all done this? Is everybody okay? How are your public schools doing? And everyone's doing just fine.
Right. Okay. So for those of you who are just joining us, we're with Laura Colangelo. She's the executive director of the Texas Private Schools Association. We're talking about the hot topic from our capital city of Austin, which is far, far away from El Paso, but directly affects us. And the hot button issue is school choice. And it looks like it's going through in with the legislation this time around. Laura's in the thick of it. I want to hear more about how this in the experience in other states has positively affected public schools. So we'll talk about that right when we get back from this break. Do not touch that dial.
We'll be right back. Don't touch that dial.
915 Talk is listener supported. If you believe that local Christian talk radio is important to our community, please take a moment to prayerfully consider taking part. For all donation options, including secure online giving, visit kelpradio.com and click on the Cornerstone Broadcasting link. Let's reach our neighbors in the borderland together.
We're back. You're listening to 915 Talk.
And we're back. This is 915 Talk. And as you've noticed, in March, we have now gone daily, Monday through Friday, at 4 to 5 p.m. We're learning to love our city, love our neighbor, give God all the glory. And it's been a fun journey for me personally. I hope that you're enjoying learning from all our guests that have been in. And I do want to say this. If you have an idea for a guest, someone who is doing something interesting in our community, just reach out to me through the contact form on kelpradio.com. It's been fun getting to have some people in who are well-known, people in the political sphere, but also some more, dare I say, obscure but beautiful citizens of the borderland as we learn about what they're doing in our community. So don't be shy. Reach out through the contact form at kelpradio.com. We have with us today Laura Colangelo, the executive director of the Texas Private Schools Association. We're talking about school choice and also some of the myths involved with that and some of the realities. Laura was careful to say that the bill is not finalized. So we're going to put an asterisk next to everything we're saying, that there could be some, adjustments, but it looks like we're pretty close, right, Laura?
We are. We have the House hearing on Tuesday, March 11th. So that will be a very long conversation between the members of the House Public Education Committee and invited witnesses, which I have been in the past, maybe on Tuesday, and the public. So
okay.
Public is invited to come and tell the legislators how they feel about this idea. And it will be debated and then voted out at some point. Then it will go to the House floor. And that's where 150 House members will vote yes or no on this program. The Senate has already passed it. So for those of us who have forgotten our civics classes from high school, you have bicameral. So we have two chambers. We have the House and the Senate. The Senate already passed it off the floor. They're ready to go.
What was the vote in the Senate?
Oh, gosh, good question. It was along party lines. I think it was 19 to 11 or something like that.
Okay, so there's 30 senators.
There's 30, right?
Okay.
So did I do that math right? I just
yeah. No,
math is not my specialty.
Yeah. I just guessed 30 because you said 1911.
31. So there must be. I think it was 19 to 12 because I think there was one Republican. Now that I'm remembering, there was one Republican who did vote against it.
Okay, all right, and so then it goes to the House, and
it's sent over to the House. The House. So there are two different programs. They're slightly different. And the House one is, we could talk about the details of that. I don't want to get too much in the weeds if it's just going to be confusing, but
right.
There are differences there. And so the House will pass their version, and then it goes to what's called the conference committee. So each chamber appoints members of the conference committee. And
Okay.
once this bill has passed both houses, and then they get together to work out the differences in the bill. It goes back out to the chambers, they vote again, and then it goes to the governor's desk. So this is not a fast process. It's a very deliberative process on purpose. I mean, we're talking about some important things. We're talking about changing the lives of possibly 100,000 children in the state of Texas. So we need to be serious about it and consider all the implications. And that's what we're doing right now. We're probably about in the middle of that process. And we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. The hearing on Tuesday should be quite a barn burner. It's, we'll have a lot of public school advocates coming out. We'll have private school families. We'll have families that want a different kind of education. So that's what this process is all about, getting together and articulating our opinions and trying to work out differences.
Right. So this is not a political talk show, but just based on my Googling as we're talking, the Texas House of Representatives is Republican 88, minority is Democrats at 62. So there would be an expectation that it would pass the House, and the governor has already said that he's going to sign it. Is that correct?
Yes, we have. He has announced that we have the votes in the House. So 150 divided by 2, we need 76 votes in the House. And so we do have those. I think there are 76 co-authors. So they've actually already filed that they will vote for this bill. I do think there will be others who join later on once it gets to the floor. They're not willing to publicly say they support it, but once we get through this process, I think we will see more, and possibly some Democrats that do vote for this bill.
Okay, so let's get to this. Well, it's going to be, how did you say, the public's invited, you can come and speak your mind. What are we going to hear from public schools? Why would they be opposed to this?
We're going to hear a lot of things. We're going to hear that we're defunding public schools, which I've already explained that this is not. But they've been in a pinch the last couple of years. They're feeling budgetary issues. There was a big influx of federal funds called ESSER funds from COVID, and those just expired. So a lot of public school budgets have been hurt by that, and so they're feeling the pain and wanting to focus on public schools and not this program for private schools. So we're gonna hear about that. They're gonna say that private schools are unaccountable, that there's just the Wild West. We won't know anything that's going on in private schools. That's not true either, because it does require accreditation for the private school. So the assertion for accreditation is that the private school provides at least equivalent to or greater than what is provided in public school. It's not the same curriculum, it's not the same TEKS, but the level of academic rigor is equivalent to that or greater than that in public school. So yes, private schools are accountable in a number of ways, but we're going to hear that we're not. We're going to hear that we discriminate against families because we cannot. There is an admission process. Every private school cannot serve all children. So we're going to hear that that's discriminatory when in fact it's just reality. Not every school can serve every child, and it would be very unfair to admit a child into a private school and not be able to meet the needs of that child. So those are the things. That's the fight. That's a preview of the upcoming fight. We've been through this before. And so I think, if you look at the committee, it looks like the majority of the committee will vote for it. So it will be voted out. But the minority voices on the committee deserve to have their day and to make their point that they don't agree with this program.
Right. Okay. And you also mentioned that in other states, when school choice is passed, it's actually improved the quality of the public schools. Why do you think that is, or how is that? Tell me more.
Well, and I love that statistic. I also love the statistic that the average person that takes advantage of the private school choice program in these Florida programs is a single woman of color making the average of $43,000 a year. So this is not something for wealthy families to take advantage of. This is the people that need help getting to a private school are the ones that we're directing it to. So, but what you alluded to is that we did see test scores go up in those areas with robust private school choice. And the reason is, I think that a child that is doing well in their public school, that is making A's in the band, on the football team, however they're connecting to their public school community, they don't need another option. It is the children that are sort of bumbling along, making, B or C or D student, who doesn't really have a group of friends, who maybe is being bullied, who just hasn't found their footing in the public schools. Those are the families that are going to seek out another type of education and possibly need this financial assistance. So I think that's the reason that you're seeing that test scores go up in the public schools once these children leave, because they're the ones that just weren't getting their needs met in the public school. And the ones that are and are thriving and will continue to thrive in public school are staying. And so those test scores have gone up.
Right. So you're also indicating that it's not like there's a mass exodus from public schools.
No, absolutely not. I mean, this is not, I mean, it's called universal. The governor likes to say it's a universal school choice. However, it's a universal school choice with a $1 billion price tag. So however many children that can be funded by this $1 billion appropriation, that's it in this program. So there will not be, first of all, there will not be a mass exodus because most children are being well served in their public schools and they want to stay and they will stay. The ones that want to leave, that need another option, there's a limited amount that can do that. And it's maybe 80 to 100,000 statewide. However, they can be funded within that $1 billion appropriation.
Right. Okay. And for those of you who are just joining us, we're with Laura Colangelo, the executive director of the Texas Private Schools Association. We're talking about school choice. Laura, I want to ask you, for those particularly churches, because that's mainly who's listening to this program, who are thinking about starting a private school, what would be your advice in general, and also with a backdrop of this legislation?
My advice would be to go to a website called tepsac.org, TEPSAC.org. And on that website are listed all of the 19 accreditors that are recognized in the state of Texas. Many of them are Christian organizations. Pick one or two that fit the mission or vision of your church and your school, the school that you want to start, and contact them for the standards of accreditation and the process by which they may apply for accreditation. That would be step number one. And talk to those organizations and tell them we're interested in starting a school. How do we get started? They have people that can help them figure out how to start the school according to the standards by which they will become accredited. And then eventually they would be eligible for the ESAs if they're interested in participating with the ESAs.
Right. Okay. So you start off by looking at the accreditation organization that best fits your vision.
Yes.
Okay. There are 18 of them.
They're 19 now.
19. Okay.
And more are applying. Obviously, there's a lot of interest in the state of Texas right now, so more are applying. And so we'll see. It may be more than 19 fairly soon.
Yeah, and accreditation is so interesting to me, particularly because those who regularly listen to our program know that my wife is the head of school at a local private school here in El Paso. They've been going through the accreditation process. And I get to hear about it pretty much every evening.
I bet you do.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that would be, and I think it's a 1.5-year process, if not more, each time they go through accreditation. What is that for someone who just doesn't know? What are those organizations looking at?
So it's a way to make sure that private schools are offering the education that they say they are to their families. It's a really robust process. I've been on 6 or 7 accreditation visits. And what it looks like is, the Accreditation Commission has their standards. Your school has to have, this kind of governance structure, and you have to serve your families in this sort of way, or, you have these kind of test scores. So what the school does is it does an internal review, and I'm sure you've heard about this from your wife.
Yes.
And you have community members, parents, teachers, everybody comes and does an analysis of the school and says, are we meeting these standards? Do we offer the education that we say we do? And we're talking about everything at every part of a school, the facilities, the teachers, even the parking, parking pickup or whatever you call it, carpool pickup. Is that safe? I mean, all the things that go into having a good school. Are we doing what we're supposed to do? You write a report, an internal report, and it goes to the accrediting commission. A team comes in of peer educators from other schools, and they come in and they have that self-study, it's called, and they visit the school for 2 or 3 or 4 days, and they sit in on classes, they look at the library, they talk to the board, they talk to the heads of school, they do a deep dive into the school and say, does it match this self-study? Are they doing what they're supposed to do? Are they offering the education that they promise? And the answer is yes or no. And, the team, and it's actually really good professional development for the ones that come in and do this deep dive as well. And they have commendations. This is what you're doing incredibly well. This is something maybe I'm taking back to my school. This is where an area you can improve. And then if there's some ways that they are not hitting the mark, they will have a certain amount of time to make those improvements in order to retain or get accreditation. So it's an incredibly good process. It's a way for schools. It's not just a checklist where someone comes in and says, are you good or bad? It's a continual improvement process. And I once talked to a commissioner of education many years ago, probably 10 or 12 years ago. And we were talking through this, and he said, if there was any way we could have a process like this for public schools, where it's not just the STAR test determining the quality of the school, if it's community involved, it's a way to really dig in and make sure the school's doing what it's supposed to do. That would be ideal. We just can't scale it to all of the 1,200 school districts. But if we could, I would do that. So It is a valid way of assessing a private school. It's comprehensive. You're knowing exactly that that school is doing what it's supposed to do and meeting or exceeding the standards of public schools.
Yeah, I think it's important for particularly faith communities because, as you said earlier in the program, it's often it's a passion project of a faith community that actually brings a school into existence. But for leaders and those types of communities who are interested in starting a private school, just to understand that if you're walking through a different private school casually, you don't see the depth of accountability that's there. And so it's important for you to understand that, I think, before jumping into the deep end and starting your own school, because you're going to be heavily scrutinized.
Yes. I mean, we need to make sure we're doing a good job. I mean, we need to make sure that especially with the school choice coming with more families entering private schools, we need to make sure that we put our money where our mouth is and that we're offering at least what's going on in the public schools. But as you know, probably a deeper, more spiritual relationship and aligned with the mission and the vision of the church. So just make sure that you're meeting those standards.
Right. Excellent. Again, if you're just joining us, we're with Laura Colangelo, the executive director of the Texas Private Schools Association. We're talking about school choice, which is currently going through the legislative process in our capital city of Austin, here in the Republic of Texas. It's a hot topic. I've met with quite a few pastors who are talking about it, other schools. There's a lot of misinformation out there. And so it is important for us to be well informed. As Laura mentioned earlier in the program, everything we're talking about could be adjusted as the process is not complete. But it seems that we're pretty close to having an understanding of what this is going to be. And I'm very happy that our audience is able to be informed on this important subject. We're about to go into a break. I just want to say a quick thank you to our KELP Impact Partner, Caring Companions. If you have an elderly loved one who needs special care but wants to stay at home, which is, I think, most elderly loved ones, Caring Companions will happily come to your house, just review your situation and give you an estimate on the cost of that. I have some friends who use them, and they speak very highly of Caring Companions. You can find all of our impact partners on kelpradio.com. We're about to go into a break. Do not touch that dial.
We'll be right back. Don't touch that dial.
Are you looking for a Bible teaching church on the west side of El Paso? This is Terry Gray, pastor of Calvary Chapel Sun City and speaker on the Summons broadcast heard each weekday at 5 p.m. here on this station. Calvary Chapel Sun City is located at 960 West Borderland Road on the west side of El Paso. We hold services on Wednesday evenings at 7 and on Sunday mornings at 9 and 11. You can find out more information about us on the web at www.ccsuncity.org. The Lord bless you, my friends.
We're back. You're listening to 915 Talk.
And we're back with Laura Colangelo, the executive director of the Texas Private Schools Association. We're talking about school choice. Now, Laura, this is the number one question. The number one question I think that Mac Daddy has. Mac Daddy Del Norte has a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old. He wants to take advantage of school choice. You mentioned that there's 300,000 students in 941 private accredited schools in Texas, and only 100,000 students are going to be able to be receive some kind of funding towards this. How do I get onto that list?
Well, I'll tell you what I know right now, but I think the asterisk is still there, TBD on the fine details. It will be prioritized by children with special needs and low-income families.
Okay.
And so I'll talk about the House version because that's what we're debating next week. So in order to be one of those 80 to 100,000 students, the priority category number 1 is families with children with disabilities that make up to 500% of free and reduced lunch. That means a family of 4 that makes around $162,000 a year with a child with a disability, they're going to be first in line to get these education savings accounts. Category number 2 is, so that first category is all children with disabilities, and then with that income limit. Category number 2 is 100% of free and reduced lunch, which is about $62,000 for a family of 4.
Okay.
That'll be category number 2.
Okay.
Category number 3 is the delta there. So between about $62,000 for a family of 4 and $162,000 for a family of 4. That's going to be prioritization number 3. That's just income. And then category number 4 is all other families with as long as there's money left over. So we want to make sure we're targeting the families that really need this money that can't afford private school already. Mm-hmm. The median tuition for private school across the state is $9,400.
Okay.
So an ESA amount of $10,000 should cover the median tuition. And so we want to make sure that it's those families that can't afford it now or struggling really hard and to afford working 2 or 3 jobs to have their children go to a private school. Those are the families that are going to get it first in line, but there is an allowance for others pending money left over in the program.
Okay. And there's nothing in the bill for families like me who have our youngest child graduating next year, like a rebate for all the years of money we put into private education.
Well, wouldn't that be nice? No, and this will begin in the fall of 2026. So it'll start with the 2026-2027 school year.
Can you, without getting too far into the weeds, can you speak into what qualifies as special needs?
So if the child is identified with an IEP in a public school right now, and there are about, I think, 7 categories of disability.
Sorry, what's an IEP?
IEP is an individualized education plan. So they have learning differences. They have physical needs. They have I think if there's some brain development issues, I think visual impairment, those sort of needs, I should have brought up. If you look on,
Right.
there's a list of categories, you can Google it, of what a child who qualifies for an IEP in a public school would have these kind of issues.
Right.
I hesitate to go too far in the weeds, but I will say, because I find this really interesting, in the House bill, Brad Buckley, who's the chair of public ed, he's an amazing person, has thought through this incredibly well. He has a school in his district that serves children with autism, and just, really thinks that school does an amazing job, and they do. And so that's why there's this focus on children with special needs in the House bill. So there is a provision in there in that first category that depending on the severity of the disability, a child could actually be eligible for up to $30,000 a year. So if you think about a child with severe special needs, that takes a lot of money to educate, to serve that child. So there is that provision in the House bill. Now, I'm very interested in the debate on that next Tuesday and see how that plays out. Because if you think about it, if a lot of children are qualify for that 30,000 amount, then fewer children statewide will get to be in the program. So it's a balancing act on how they figure this out. But just knowing his heart and wanting to make sure that those families with those children with special needs are first in line. I'm curious to see where we land on that. If that 30,000 stays, or the Senate version was only 10,500 for children without special needs and 11,500 for children with special needs. So again, they'll come together in conference committee and work out those differences, and we'll see where it finally lands.
Yeah, this is super interesting because the total amount of children in this program will be 100,000. And there's 3 tiers. Will 100,000 be used up in the first tier of special needs?
I don't know. I don't know. There you have the issue here, and this is where we're getting pushback from other people as well. Will there be a spot in a private school for that child with that specific special need? So there's a matching situation here too, right? Because not every private school can serve these kind of children with special needs. So
right, yeah.
So
sorry, that was actually my next question. Is I actually think, and I don't know if I'm right, maybe you can speak into this in a general sense, I would say most private schools do not have special needs programs that particularly, or is that incorrect?
That is incorrect.
Okay.
We did a survey. We do it every fall before a legislative session. 75% of private schools do serve children with special needs.
Okay.
And when we asked about their currently enrolled private school students, 19% of them have some sort of special need. So I think what's happened, if you think about private schools from a long time ago, before we were more sophisticated about identifying children with special needs, that may have been true. But when you admit a preschooler or a pre-K child and that family into your private school, and you maybe don't even know necessarily that they have a special need, but it's identified as they're in first, second, third, fourth, fifth grade, you want to make sure that you keep that child in your community and that family is part of your community. So you're going to try as hard as you can to develop programs to keep that child and meet that child's needs. And I think over time, private schools have developed those programs knowing that they want to keep the communities intact.
Right. Yeah, that's a huge issue. I think this is just great for us to understand, because we're not talking about a huge percentage of our current students being able to take advantage of this program.
We are not, and I appreciate this platform to say to everyone that it is not every citizen in the state of Texas is going to have an education savings account right off the bat. So,
right.
I want to manage expectations as best we can, and it's my job in this process to make sure that we are building the best program that we can, that will serve the families and the schools will want to participate. So if it does succeed, and we're looking at the other states that have been doing this for 20 years, we're learning from them. It's the benefit of being a late adopter to this program. If it is meeting the needs of those families, it could expand in future years. But when we're talking about in 2026, 100,000 children statewide that will be able to take part of this program.
Let me ask you this, because you said we're late adopters. I find that to be interesting because in my limited perspective of the universe, Texas is generally a Republican-leaning state. This seems to be a very much a Republican-leaning issue. Why has it taken so long?
That's a great question. It really comes down to rural Republicans versus urban Republicans. So
Okay.
rural Republicans were hesitant to jump on and understand this issue because 95% of the jobs in their community could be from the local public school district.
Oh, okay.
And they are loath to try to understand this. And there's, quite honestly, there aren't that as many people in the rural areas, and there aren't as many private schools in the rural areas. So it just doesn't seem to be as big an issue for them. And so it is more of the urban Republicans that have private schools, that have families that really want this program. They're the ones that are leading the charge. And we've hopefully done a better job of educating everyone, including rural Republicans and Democrats as well, on what this really means, a reality of a school choice program, so it's less threatening overall.
Okay, so you said not everyone will have an education savings account. Is that your final goal?
That is up to my board. They will tell me what our goal is.
Well answered.
Yeah.
But
What I will say is let's get this done and see how well it works. If it doesn't work for the state of Texas, then no, that will not be our goal. If it is a program that is well implemented, that is serving children, that is not harming public schools, then yes, let's make it grow, and to the point where we're getting every child in the state of Texas gets the education they need and deserve.
Love it. Again, for those who are just catching the tail end of this conversation, we've been with Laura Colangelo. She's the executive director of the Texas Private Schools Association. You'll be able to get the link with all the links to re-listen to this conversation at kelpradio.com. Just look for that 915 talk link, and you'll be able to listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Watch us on YouTube. It's a great viewing experience. But I think it is important for us as the KELP listening community, for us in El Paso to understand this situation. Shout out to our listeners up north in New Mexico. Hope that you also get this kind of legislation. Laura, in the couple minutes we have left, I want to ask, what is your dream for private schools in Texas?
My dream is that they prepare for this program, that they are able to answer those prayers that I hear from them, which is families come to my door. They want the education that we're able to provide through a faith lens, or, if they serve special needs, and they simply can't afford it. And so I want to be able to allow access once my private school scholarship money runs out, that I can let these families experience what it is to be a part of this private school. So it is my dream that we open those doors for those families that can't afford it. And the mechanism by which we will do that is this ESA program. So I'm in the weeds, I'm in the fight, I'm in the mud right now, trying to get that done. But my dream and my goal is that it's a really, really good program that serves those families and allows those heads of school that have had to turn those families away to be able to welcome them into their community, and that they find the education they need.
Love it. Thank you. Also, people can find the Texas Private Schools Association website. It's texasprivateschools.org. We'll also have that link on the kelpradio.com 915 talk link, so you can find that. They have a very helpful page here that just shares some of the myths and realities of school choice. So you can go through that. Any last thoughts before we have to wrap up this conversation, Laura?
No, I just appreciate being able to talk in depth on this. Usually it has to be a sound bite and we move on. So I really enjoyed this conversation. So thank you for having it.
Yeah, well, thank you for all of your time. Best of luck. I think I speak for most of our audience that we really hope that this goes through, and really hope that this builds both our public schools and private schools, both here in the borderland and around Texas. Thanks again. We've been with Laura Colangelo, Executive Director of the Texas Private Schools Association. And as we always say at the end of this program, let's learn to love our city, love our neighbor, and give God all the glory. This has been 915 Talk. You have been listening to 915 Talk on KELP Christian Radio. To listen to past recordings of 915 Talk, just visit KELPradio.com and click on the 915 Talk link. Until next time, love your neighbor, love your city, and give God all the glory.